It's February 19, 2024, President's Day. We don't take days off around here at the Level Up Podcast on Fans First Sports Network. Rocking out with my boy Andy P, Big G with that college football talk. Y'all, there is no offseason. But before we get started, make sure you get up them algorithms. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share with everybody that's out there that you know loves college football. You can hear us on Apple's Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. But before me even going forward, I got to send it over to my co-host, Andy P. What's crack-a-lacking, bro? What's going on with you, man?
You know, I'm loving this.
You muted.
There we go. I gotta get fined now, I guess. That's how that's working.
Yeah, man, Andy.
Mute phone car.
Andy, you got the first fine on Level Up Podcast, man. I wasn't even prepared for it, so I got to get my sign. There you go, fine. Let's go. Let's go, man.
Look, I'll take the fine, much like the same way. You know how everyone's bemoaning the changes in college football? I love them.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about some changes here. One of my favorite changes that's happened today at 10 a.m., Syracuse's head coach, Fran Brown, sends out a tweet at Chase Simmons, one of the veteran returning players to the Syracuse team, sends out a tweet that says, "Bro, heard you were turned at the club last night. Hope you had a good time. Well-deserved." Winking face. That man is going to be running two-a-days for the next, I don't know how long. We're in an era where coaches are calling out their players on social media for hitting up the club during spring football season, man. Like, this is there's some things happening in college football I know everybody's not a fan of. Personally, I love that. I think that's the best part about college football.
Yeah, a lot of people, Andy, that don't know like the intricacies of college football, don't understand how much goes into the preparation to lead up to the season. You know, I just talked to I ain't gonna tell you who it is. I got an insider with the Ohio State football program. I almost told his name and said who he was. But anyway, he was telling me about the mat sessions that went on the Valentine's Day massacre at Ohio State on the 14th of February, and how Mick Moriarty had them boys out there early in the morning and often just trying to create the toughness and the culture. Because listen, whether you like it or not, these are professional athletes. And, you know, people can debate me, debate you, talk all they want to talk about what this actually is. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a 17-game playoff season. You know, whether you like it or not, it's 16, possibly 17 games. That's a pro athlete. So you have to develop these young people at the pace of a professional athlete now. Because if you don't get them now, it ain't going to pay off come December and January this year coming up. So like Andy said, bro, we got a lot to talk about on the show. I know we're going to get to this topic, but Andy, we got a couple of banger topics right off the back, bro. I mean, I ain't gonna say the least about it. I think, you know, we cover a lot of things on the Level Up College Football Podcast, but we got a couple of big bangers that I don't think people need to really understand, and they don't really know about as of yet. One of them has to do with, you keep holding up that Syracuse Cup. You know, there's some shenanigans going on over in that ACC, man, and I'll let you get to it first because I got a couple of two choice things to say concerning what's going to happen with the ACC. But because you're the homegrown Syracuse Orangeman ACC aficionado or expertado on this topic, Andy, what's going on over in the ACC country, man? What's happening?
Yeah, the last Tampa Bay Sentinel, they were the ones that had the full-on report about Florida State and Project Seminole, which is something that I'm going to mention. Essentially, the ACC is locked into something called a grant of rights that they signed back in the early ESPN TV deals. It essentially says that teams do not control their own TV rights. The ACC controls those TV rights. Now, what made the grant of rights so special is that if a team leaves the ACC, that doesn't mean that those rights change. That grant of rights is valid for that school when they signed it to the end of the time period. So we're in the situation where A lot of these schools are locked into this grant of rights, which I believe runs through 2036. And what it means is that in order to buy your way out, you got to pay for all those years through 2036. No one knows the exact amount of what a buyout would be, but we're talking about something north of 150 million, maybe a little bit less than $250 million. And like, that's $250 million to get out of the ACC. There's very few schools that have that, but the two schools that probably are the most likely to raise that kind of money, Florida State and Clemson, really want to leave the conference because of what we talked about last week, which is this arms race that's going on in college football. All of these schools, they're not necessarily hoarding the talent the same way, but they are building and developing more resources. They're developing professional coaching staffs. They just have more than everybody else. And they can do that because the Big Ten and the SEC, their current TV deals equal out to about 40 to 50 million per year per school.
Facts.
Big Ten a little bit north of that with the new deal. SEC is expected to be a little bit north of that with their new deal coming up. ACC is sitting around. I know from talking to people at Syracuse, I know Syracuse's check is somewhere in the neighborhood of $22 to $25 million a year. It seems like that's evenly split throughout all the schools. So you can see that if you're a Florida State and a Clemson and you're expected to compete at the same level as an Ohio State, as a Georgia, as an Alabama, you're not even making the same amount of money as a Purdue or a South Carolina would in the yearly TV revenue. Now, the problem with this is, and this is where Project Seminole comes in, this is where the Tampa Bay Sentinel report comes in, getting that money is not easy. That is a lot of money to ask from boosters. That, again, these are college universities. They cannot just spend, no college president is going to allow that kind of money to be spent just for athletics. So what Florida State is doing is looking into private equity. So your hedge funds, your Saudi oil money, these kinds of funds to basically come in, front the money to allow them to leave the conference and then pay back that investor over time with the increased revenue. Because the argument is like, look, we're able to do this on 25 million. We'd be getting 50 million. You know, we give you some, we keep some, everybody ends up happy. Personally, I think this is a terrible move. I think this is something that's going to lead to wider college sports disruption. But I do know this. I can say this with 98% certainty. I know that right now, the argument that Florida State has is that they want to be in the SEC. There's no way in hell the SEC is allowing them in, considering how big of an influence Florida has in that conference.
Facts.
Now, what I do know is that Clemson, who again is probably blocked in the SEC because of South Carolina and doesn't quite fit the profile of the Big Ten. Like, I know the Big Ten has some academic universities, but they're really going for like big on state schools. Clemson's smaller than South Carolina. It's a decent sized school, but it's not the same. I know that Clemson has an invite ready and waiting to the Big 12. If Clemson was a free agent today, the Big 12 would have it. Clemson would sign the deal. They'd be happy to go to the Big 12. And I think that is where things get interesting here. And Big G, I'm interested on your take on this, is because we've always framed this discussion as the Big Two, the SEC and the Big Ten. And in reality, there's always been 5 conferences, with the Pac-12, the ACC, and the Big 12 always being the little brothers in the situation. Now, we saw, obviously, the Big Ten was the school that raided the Pac-12. Big 12 also got plenty of schools in that move as well.
Total facts.
It would be really, I'm curious as to what you think is that what if we don't move to this Big Two and it becomes a Big Three, and the Big 12 becomes this third player that enters into the conference? They pick up the best ACC schools. They picked up a bunch of the Pac-12 schools. And suddenly, even though they don't necessarily have the same level of notoriety as the Big Ten or the SEC in a lot of areas, they would have Florida State and Clemson, two of the biggest names in their respective areas with two of the loudest alumni bases out there. They would have a decent chunk of the Southwest with the Arizona schools and the Big 12 schools that they've added. They've already got the heartland. I know that they lost Texas and Oklahoma, but they have a lot of other Texas schools. They have a lot of other schools in that Midwest area. And right now, they have Coach Prime, the number one attraction on TV. This is a weird thing, but like, if you feel confident that Colorado can lock down Dion, this feels like the Big 12's opportunity to disrupt this idea that we have where there's going to be two conferences in college. Maybe there's room for a third. I'm interested on your thoughts on that.
Andy, we talked a little bit on the chat line earlier today, and it's amazing how some of our thought process are synchronized with each other, because this is intel that I'm getting all the way up here in Ohio concerning a Big 3 conference deal versus a Big 2 conference deal. And the Big 12 is gaining momentum like there's no tomorrow. But there's a catch-22 in this. This is how it's the catch-22. The catch-22 is, will the Big 12 eventually scale down? So what that means is those top-tier schools that don't bring football revenue, are those schools willing to amp up the football programs in order to compete with some teams that you might bring in, like a Clemson and like a Florida State? Because you're going to have the facilities and everything to match blow for blow, person for person, and be able to be on the same scale with recruiting. So I think, and I want to point this out too, how we all keep saying and we all keep hearing it's the SEC and the Big Ten. Let me tell y'all something, and you heard it here first on the Level Up podcast. The SEC and the Big Ten is not as secure as what you think because of this thing and this reason alone. Money makes the world go around. And as far as bigger revenue shares that goes on, contrast with television deals and the ability to bring students on campus and sell tickets is how all this revenue is going to generate. So the deal has been for the SEC. We're landlocked as far as a conference. We don't want to add another team that doesn't touch what we currently have. So bringing in, like how you said, Andy, a Florida State to a Florida might not be beneficial to a SEC. Same difference in bringing a Clemson to a South Carolina, because they already have that state supposedly landlocked, and they don't want that inter-conference rival. That's why this year's a test run with the whole ideology of Texas A&M and Texas. They want to see if they can bring that rivalry back concerning an in-state thing that was going on for years. If it doesn't work, the SEC might be looking a different kind of way come within the next 2 or 3 years. Last point I want to make about this is that the Big Ten Conference is only looking for Tier 1 research institutions to come in and be a part of the Big Ten. If you're not a Tier 1 research institution, you don't have an opportunity to join the Big Ten. I don't care how much revenue you got. So that's where Washington, Oregon, UCLA, and USC had to prove that they were able to be Tier 1 research institutions to fit the current format of the Big Ten. So saying all that, I'm going to say this. I think that, in my opinion, and Andy, I've been trying to get to this one all day. I think it's not a matter of if, I think it's a matter of when the ACC is cooked. How soon? As early as the end of next season. And that's going to be another topic that we're going to talk about, this 5+7 deal that most people don't even know nothing about. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But the issue is, I think that the teams are going to have, the conferences, the Big 3, is going to have their choice about who goes where and what. So now you're going to get into, is North Carolina really all that cool with Duke? You know, because a Big 10 might say, well, we want one, we don't want the other one. Is Florida State really that cool with a Miami? Because the SEC will say, well, we want one and not the other one because of the lure and the hype and all whatever else. To where the Big 12 is in position to where if they cut some of those bottom feeders and they can add power, oh, yeah, it's going to go down. So a 3-team conference deal? Oh, absolutely. Andy, I can see it coming but I think eventually, maybe in my lifetime, maybe before the end of my lifetime, it'll eventually be maybe 2, but I can definitely see it going to 3 super fast in a hurry. Your thoughts, bro?
No, I definitely agree, because you saw this in the most recent TV deals that came out. And really, we can yell at all the boogeyman that we want to. The real reason the NCAA is dying is TV. It's because college sports, is the #1 inventory for all of these sports markets. The NFL, guaranteed viewers, but we saw it with DirecTV. We might see it with YouTube TV. I'm interested to get those numbers whenever they release them.
Yeah.
Sunday Ticket was a loss leader for DirecTV. They did not make money on the deal. The NFL rights are just too expensive for you to make any money off of. College, you get the eyeballs, plus you get the positive ROI, which is why these college deals became so lucrative, because the schools realized we have something that we can provide the networks year round, whether it's basketball, whether it's football, whether it's women's gymnastics, women's college basketball, all these other sports that are popping up. That's all part of these TV deals, but football is the key gem of the whole thing. And so when you look at it right now, ESPN has a piece of the SEC and the Big 12. They don't have a piece of the Big 10. And this is where I think when you're talking about Big G, the idea of these conferences deciding these things, I really think it's the TV networks working with the conferences to decide these things. Because if the ACC goes away, ESPN gets out of this long-term commitment to these ACC TV rights, but they will want to make sure that their SEC and Big 12 investments are protected and they get the best of the ACC into their portfolio in some way, shape, or form. Same thing with the Big 10, which is why I know Tim's in the chat and he's not going to like this, but the Big 10 added NBC for a reason.
Facts.
Because then the whole reason that Notre Dame has stayed independent is because of that lucrative NBC TV deal. If there is a way that all of this consolidation happens, Notre Dame is going to go to the Big 10. Just no ifs, ands, or buts. They've already got the TV deal there. There will be some kind of resolution made so that way that Notre Dame can still keep their share of the TV revenue that they draw in, because they're just such a unique draw when it comes to these things. But the Big 10 has NBC and Fox on board. And I
don't disagree, bro. I don't disagree.
Yeah. No, and I think that this is something that Tim's bringing up that I think is really interesting. And we talked about it when we were doing our season preview. This is going to fundamentally alter how scheduling works, because like you're saying, I don't think that you can have these 20-team mega conferences, but you're still going to have 16 teams per conference in the hyper consolidated version of that. That probably means for an ESPN, for Fox, for an NBC, in order to get the most amount of games on their networks and on these respective streaming platforms that they're trying to make a thing, you need to have a game on Peacock. You need to have a game on Paramount Plus. You need to have a game on ESPN Plus. You're going to need to have more conference games. We saw it in college basketball over the last few years, where they've been slowly increasing the number of mandated conference games. I think we're going to start seeing the same thing in college football, where maybe you get 2 games a year, one for a rivalry, one for a warm-up against a smaller school in your area. And then the other 10 are all conference games in order to maximize that revenue potential and that TV inventory.
So listen, last point I want to make about this, right? Andy knows and I know that you got to follow the revenue, bro. And whoever's making deals behind closed doors, believe me, that's eventually going to come out, because where there's smoke, there's fire. So the deal is this. The SEC just signed a lucrative ESPN deal. They're locked in. All right? They're locked. And they're going to have a little bit of sprinkle of games on that ABC thing. The Big 10 already had the little piece cut with with NBC. But now they done signed their contract with CBS. The odd man out is Fox, who has the part of the ACC late games, but who had the Pac-12 and had aligned themselves with the Big 12. So that's already telling you that ACC is going to try to get with the Fox deal, because the Big 12's locked in with Fox. So that's how you can see how this consolidation, and as they pick teams off one by one, the ACC's cooked. The ACC's cooked.
And
that's why you can see it.
No, and I think that one of the interesting things that will happen, I think this is going to be really fascinating, is that we know there's going to be like a pro and a minor league version of college football. It probably not when this happens, but probably like 2035, 2040. I think that's where this is going to be. But for the short term, what this means is that if you're a Syracuse, you're a Pitt, you're a Boston College, you're a Temple, you're left out of all these things, and you're clearly not the top of the top. But if you're Pitt and you're Syracuse, Boston College to a lesser extent, you're Rutgers, you're still sitting on prime recruiting ground. And I think what you see is you start to see like we're kind of going to go full circle here. The Syracuse fans are always saying bring back the Big East for college basketball. But from a football perspective, like you look at Syracuse, they just pulled a bunch of 4-star New Jersey recruits from bigger schools because they've now decided that our roster is going to be explicitly New Jersey, DC, Maryland, Virginia kids, New York kids. That is what this team is going to be. We are going to be a Northeast school. Pitt has always been predominantly a Pennsylvania, Ohio, a little bit of Virginia in their recruiting profile. I think there's a world where as the Big 12 consolidates, as the Big 10 consolidates, as the SEC consolidates, you see these hyper regional conferences come back. And they're not going to be as big. They're not going to be as splashy. They're not going to have the same level of influence on the sport. But from like a purist perspective, as someone who loves college football and like yearns for these old days where like every game in the conference is a regional rivalry, there is an element of that coming back, which I do think, while a lot of this stuff is like maybe not my favorite because Syracuse isn't included, like seeing Syracuse play meaningful games against West Virginia would be a great thing to have. And like same thing with the basketball side, like coming back. I think there are silver linings in this, even if your school isn't necessarily one of the schools being chosen to go to these upper level conferences that are consolidating.
Bottom line is you got to level up. If you don't level up your program right now over the next 2-3 years, you're a bottom feeder and you're not going to have any opportunity to move forward with these big time conferences. Hey, Andy, look, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Get a quick word from our partners. If you're watching us live on YouTube, just stay right where you're at. For all those that's listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, we'll be back in about like 10 seconds after we pay a few bills. So we'll talk to you guys after our sponsors speak their piece. See ya. And we're back with the Level Up College Football Podcast. Andy P, Big G in the building on Fans First Sports Network. Rocking out talking college football because like we've said and stated over and over again, the season doesn't sleep. You know, we're less than about 40 days away from spring ball. You got the draft. We got all kind of other stuff coming up for college football. But Andy, second topic, man. The coaching carousel, man, in 2024. We done saw Nick Saban walk away. We've seen Chip Kelly, who at UCLA, walk away to become an offensive coordinator. You've seen the coach at Boston College walk away to become an offensive coordinator. You see Bill O'Brien, who Ohio State hired as a coach, to go over to Boston College to become the head coach. But I want to know, oh, wait a minute. I forgot about Mr. Harbaugh that left Michigan and went to the NFL. But I want to know, because of the landscape and NIL, how college football has changed, if you got a top 5 of coaches that's on the hot seat for the 2024 season, who you got, Andy P? Who you got, bro?
I think you and I are probably going to have the same guy because it's the guy that everybody's looking at. Mr. Napier down in Florida, man. I do not know what's been going on down there. That guy is still recruiting. He is still their NIL situation hasn't been great, but it's still brought in top end talent. And yet they scream every year 7-5, 8-4. I know that they can't figure out how to take it to the next level because every time that they have a great like that, this year's a great example. They have a solid showing against Georgia, and you go, man, that's a really good game to have. And then they go to Kentucky, who runs one of 2 running plays, 30 straight plays, and they get gashed. Just like really simple, not executing, not adjusting well. And it becomes this thing where, man, that's coaching. Like that level of inconsistency is either talent or coaching. And Florida has the talent. So it's clearly on the coaching staff to figure this out. And I like Napier a lot. Like I think what Napier did at Memphis before Florida was fantastic. And obviously we've seen that coaching tree, that coaching path works. Just look down the road at Florida State. And I think that's where the pressure on Napier comes, because Norvell, who followed him from Memphis and then immediately went to Florida State, Norvell's got Florida State where Florida thinks they should be already. And for Florida, I know the SEC is tough. I know it's a tough conference, but dude, you've got the roster. And I think the cracks are showing because we saw this year on signing day, Florida lost out on closing some of the top prospects in their class to flips. And it just feels like it feels like the wheels are going to come off this year. But again, I think Napier is a good coach. He has been a good coach in the past. Like, you don't want to count those guys out. But I do not think that this man lasts the season. I think that that's the number one guy right now.
You don't think he makes it through the end of the regular season? You think he's out of there already?
I mean, if you're Florida, like I don't want to play the schedule game and read out all of the games. But if you look at, like, again, we kind of talked about it, the consolidation of the SEC has meant that things are going to get tough. And so they opened the year against the Miami team that super inconsistent, but is still really good.
Yeah.
They have to go on the road to play Texas and Florida State this year. And they've got LSU, Ole Miss, Georgia, and Kentucky. Georgia's a neutral game, but Kentucky, Ole Miss, and LSU are all coming to the Swamp. Now, obviously, it's a tough place to play, but like, is Florida favored in any of those games? Probably
0.
just Kentucky. Like, that's it. Like, that is, to me, so if we're just going by straight probabilities looking at it now, that's 5 losses, man. Like, you can't do that for 3 or 4 straight years, however long it's been there, when you've got this 5-star talent here. So I just think that by the time that Florida State game rolls around, I do not think Napier's the coach unless Florida is like 9-2 rolling into that game.
Yeah, man, Andy, I think that's big facts. And I had him down as my number 1. But my number 2 and my number 3. Now, let me just say that. Well, first of all, let me go back. Norvell, you're cooked. All right. So you can stick a fork in him. But coaching hot seats has a lot to do with expectations. Right. And there's a lot of expectations in Big Ten country. Okay. So I got a double-headed sword of coaches that I think the seat is so hot. Like, it's like barbecue, 350 degrees, letting the smoke up, and you're like, oh my God, how can they survive in there? One of them is James Franklin in Penn State. I got James Franklin. I got the wagon circled on him. And because he's had multiple years where the expectation was for him to beat Ohio State and to beat Michigan, and he hasn't done it. He hasn't beat Ohio State and Michigan. So now you got Mr. Harbaugh gone. Program's over with. They got their national championship. Ryan Day, which I'm going to get to in a minute, some things going on over there. But you add a Oregon, who's super hot as a team. You add a Washington. You add a UCLA. You add a USC, who Lincoln Riley, people are down on USC. Y'all better not slip on Lincoln Riley and USC next year in the Big Ten. You better not slip on them. Because I'm telling you right now, a trip to Los Angeles might get you fired. Going out to LA you might get out there and get embarrassed. So it might get you fired, bro. So you better not slip at all on what's going on in Trojan land. But James Franklin cannot afford to have 3 or 4 losses in the conference this year with the expansion of the Big Ten. He can't afford to drop to Oregon, drop to USC, drop to Ohio State, and drop to Michigan. Those 4 losses, he's cooked. James Franklin will not be the coach at Penn State next year. I promise you. So I think the seat is real hot because the expectation is maybe 1, maybe 2 losses. That's it. The other coach, hey, Mr. Ryan Day. Buckeye Nation, bro. Whether you like it or not, I know Ohio State fans listen to the podcast. I know there's a lot of people that rock with me because I rock with the Buckeyes. But I got to tell the truth, man. Listen, with the offseason additions of what they got out in the transfer portal and what they got with the incoming freshman class, including some stabilization with 3 quarterbacks. Not one, not 2, but 3. They got Aaron Nolan, who was a top 5 quarterback in this year's class. They got Sand, who was the number 1 pro pass quarterback from the class from the year before. And you had Will Howard from Kansas State. Come on, dog. And all those returning starters you got, Emeka Buka, JTT, Jack Sawyer, Cody Simon, Denzel Burke, Tyleek Williams, Donovan Jackson. Listen, the list goes on. They listen, Ryan Day, I'm telling you right now, bro, you better not blow this one. You mess around and got 2 losses at the end of it, and one of them is that TUN, that TTUN. Oh, you're cooked. So I think the seat has never been as hot as it has ever been in Columbus, Ohio. Not to mention the fact that he's lost 3 straight against the University of Michigan. So on top of all of that, so with expectations comes hot seat. That's what I'm thinking, Andy. Your thoughts about my 2 Big Ten coaches, man?
No, I agree, because I think a lot of it too comes down to the idea that, like, so Steve Sarkisian just got a new contract at Texas after this year. He's making little over $10 million every year, getting all these benefits, all these perks. It's about the same that James Franklin's making. Like right now, would you take James Franklin or Steve Sarkisian? And I take Sark 10 times out of 10.
Yeah.
And so we're at this situation where, like, obviously, good for Franklin and his agent for raking Penn State and getting that money. But, like, man, you got to show some results here at some point. And I think that on that note, you kind of mentioned it. You mentioned it with Ryan Day. Like, that's the issue for him. There are some programs where if you win 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 games, whatever it is, like, you hit that number, that's it. That means good job. There are some schools where you got to win 1 game in order to keep your job. And I'm telling you right now, if Ryan Day last year went 9-3 but beat Michigan, we would not be having this conversation.
That's total facts.
The entire conversation would be about how Ryan Day got the Michigan monkey off of his back. And I think that this is just, you can't lose 4 in a row. You can't lose 4 in a row to Michigan. And so I think that right now we've definitely, those are the top 3 guys I think you got to keep an eye on, just because of those are all jobs with expectations. Those are the 3 expectations jobs. The one job that I do want to flag out that's just performance-based, and like you said in the last segment, Big G, like, this is a program that needs to level up. It's the Pittsburgh Panthers and Pat Narduzzi.
Facts.
This is a program that went to the ACC title game 3 years ago with Kenny Pickett at quarterback and looked like they were finally turning a quarter. This is a program that regularly recruits 4 and gets a handful of 5 stars every year because of where they're based. And this is a program that won 3 games last year. This is a program that has yet to be able to find a quarterback. He's really only had 1 quarterback in his time at Pitt, and that was Pickett, who again was there for 5 years.
Trash. So, but that's a whole nother thing about me.
Do not get me started on the Kenny Pickett saga right now. This is that's for another day. But this is my point, is that if you're Narduzzi, man, and we're talking about the ACC being cooked, Pitt needs to find a way to get into one of these conferences the same way Syracuse did. And right now, Syracuse just out-recruited Pitt this cycle. Like, that should be a giant red flag for the University of Pittsburgh if Syracuse is hiring a new coach and able to turn the corner like that. Because honestly, Pitt can be a perennial top 25 program. Like, they've got the potential there. They share a facility with the Steelers. Like, they have access to everything that you could want. And Narduzzi has consistently done the right things in terms of messaging. He wants to be a tough program. He wants to be a defense-first program, things that Pittsburghers love to hear. But, man, that offense is just regressing to a level where this is not sustainable. And I think Narduzzi is another one who, Pitt's got a tricky schedule this year. I don't know if he makes it to the end of the year if they're on the same track that they were last year, where they're only winning a couple of games.
Andy, I don't disagree, man. Like I said, Tim Lyons said KP8 equals trash, big trash. Hey, listen, I'm going to say it on, and I'm a podcaster. I work for Steel Curtain Network. Kenny Pickett ain't that answer, bro. We got to do something different over there in Pittsburgh. But at the collegiate, he played decent, but he wasn't no first-round draft pick. I knew that going into it. We reached. However, like you said, Andy, they got to identify a quarterback in Pitt, because you know why Syracuse also, they showed me something with the hire from the guy from Georgia, and they was able to get McCord. I said, oh yeah, they got, and I heard this, and I know this is on the same subject. Man, there's rumors going around that Syracuse could mess around and win the ACC this year based on their schedule. I saw it, like, they don't play nobody. They don't play Clemson. They don't play Florida State. They don't play Miami. Like, wait a minute, you play all the bottom feeders. You could win the ACC. So
why? So great example. Why couldn't Narduzzi go and get McCord? Like, to me, that would be like Pitt. You add McCord in there, that fixes a lot of the issues that they had last year. And yet Pitt wasn't even in on any of McCord's lists. And so, and again, like, this is a New Jersey kid. This is a kid who played at Ohio State. Like, it should be really easy. And Pitt's just not in on these offensive guys. And to me, like, again, where college football is going, with where things are looking, this is a make or break year at Pitt. They got to, like, I think Narduzzi that one is purely performance based, not even expectations based. Like, that one is one where if they don't win 6 or 7 games this year, he's done before, like, when they get that 6th or 7th loss.
Total facts, man. All right, Andy, we're going to go to our next subject, bro. So today is the 19th of February, 2024. Little be known to, unless you are like a college football extraordinaire like me and Andy P. There's a little vote that's going to go down tomorrow on February 20th. It's the expansion or the change or the flip the script for the college football playoff. That most people, they know it's going to 12. But this, what we're going to talk to you guys about, this new format, could change the game or the landscape for college football forever. Andy, let the people know a little bit about this 5+7 that they about to, because I think the vote's going to go through. But about this 5+7 that's coming, it's going to come to your living room come this fall.
Yeah, so the idea is that the college football playoff going to 12 teams needs to have some sort of rules about who can be into the playoff, much like we did with the 4-team playoff, in terms of making sure that we had a representative from a non-power conference with the rules. And so again, prior to this year, what had been put on the table was that, look, we've got 5 power conferences. All 5 power conferences should be guaranteed a playoff spot. That doesn't mean the top 5 seeding. It just means the top 5 spot. Or it just means 5 spots. And so that was the SEC, the Big 10, Big 12, ACC, Pac-12. Obviously, what has happened since then has been the complete combustion of one of those conferences in the Pac-12. But right now, the Pac-12 is still a legal entity that is only Oregon State and Washington State. And so, as of speaking, according to the reporting done by ESPN's Heather Dinich, who's been covering this really well, the expectation is that this will pass, and it will either be 4-1 or 5-0. The commissioners would like it, all the conference commissioners would like it to be 5-0, show solidarity here, but it's going to pass. The big question becomes then, does that mean that Arizona State or Washington State is guaranteed entry into the playoff every year? Does this mean that they are going to change it so that way it is whatever the 5th next best conference is? So whether it's the Sun Belt or the MAC or whatever conference might be there, is that conference champion going to be in? These are things that need to be decided after the vote, because the vote right now is just top 5 conferences champions plus 7 at-large teams. And I think that in our previous conversation, this is where things get interesting for the ACC, because if this comes to pass, the carrot that you can dangle to every single school is that, look, stay in the ACC because we will always have a guaranteed spot in the playoff. Florida State, Clemson, you leave and you go to the SEC, Big 10, or more likely the Big 12, you're competing with a lot more schools that you don't know if you can beat regularly. If you're Florida State, you know you can beat everybody in the ACC. If you're Clemson, you know you can beat most everybody in the ACC except for Florida State as of last year. So for them, it's this cost benefit analysis of staying in the ACC a year longer so that I can have an easier road to the playoff outweigh the potential revenue gains that I would get by going to another conference but playing a tougher schedule and maybe not being in there as consistently. And I think that that's where this 5+7 model gets interesting because, again, it incentivizes us to have more college football conferences instead of less. And that, to me, is, again, very different with what we're seeing everywhere else inside of college football.
So if you had to take a guess about the vote, what do you think? Which way it's going to go? Which way you think it's going to go?
I think that the answer is yes. I think it's probably going to be unanimous and be 5-0, if only because if you're Washington State and you're Oregon State, yes, you are not in a good spot right now. But I do think that they are trying to pitch, and we've seen it with the Mountain. We've heard some rumors they're going to play like a Mountain West-based schedule. Like they could become the leaders of a new Pac-12. And again, if the Pac-12 is guaranteed a playoff spot every year, that's really beneficial for recruiting-wise when you're Washington State and Oregon State. And now you have to compete with Big Ten recruiters coming in to your areas. Because, look, Big Ten's not going to let all the good talent in the Pacific Northwest just stay in the Pacific Northwest. They're going to try and go get some of that for themselves.
That's facts.
And I do think that this is where you vote for the 5+7 and you go from there. But I do think it is interesting that they're not locking in which conferences get those 5 slots. And that's the fine print that I'm sure is being discussed and debated with all these college commissioners together as we speak.
Andy, man, I agree with you on probably about 90% of it. And I know that there's some shuffling behind. Matter of fact, my inside sources are telling me that there's actually shuffling going on behind closed doors about who's going to get what bid and how. So we know for sure you're going to get the ACC. You know for sure you're going to get the Big Ten. You know for sure you're going to get the SEC. It looks like now for sure you're going to get the Big 12. So there's 4. Who that 5th one is, don't know. However, I will preference this in totality. I believe that the format is going to be 4 + 4 + 4. I think they're going to go to a 4-4-4 deal. And this is what I think they're going to do. They're going to guarantee, and this is where the power is going to shift to the College Football Playoff Committee. Because if you've noticed, they've been trying to give the committee more. And because right now, the committee don't even have to really explain to you what's going on until it comes time when the polls start coming out, right? They're not telling you, they're not being fully discreet on how they're disclosing the information on who they decide who's 5th, who's 6th, who's 7th. They're not telling you that information. It's nowhere out there to be found. You got to know somebody who knows somebody who's inside the room to even get an inkling. But they're almost swore to secrecy behind closed doors. But I'm telling you, 4 + 4 + 4 might be the deal. This is how it's going to work. The 4 power conferences guaranteed playoff bids. Matter of fact, the 4 playoff conference champions will be probably seeds 1 through 4. The next 4 are going to be the highest ranked college football teams that are not in a lock to win their conference champion. So the next 4, so like when the poll comes out, so if they rank like a Georgia who has maybe we'll say 2 losses or 3 losses higher than a 1-loss another team conference champion, right? So that's where the conference, where the committee's going to have their power. They're going to flex on you. And they're going to say, okay, we got the 4 champions. Let's get the 4 next best teams. The last 4 is going to be, okay, let's look at the body of work of a team from a Sun Belt conference versus a body of work at an at-large Washington State team or an at-large Oregon State team. And if the body of work guarantees that you're in, then yeah. This is where the conversation gears towards the Notre Dames, the team that's not in a conference. So because I don't think they're going to get that, Notre Dame's going to get that +4, that middle +4. But I think Notre Dame's going to be locked into that bottom +4. To where unless they're undefeated, there's no way. Because they're going to get the champions, then who they say is the next 4 best. And then after that, okay, let's look at the whole body of work in totality. This is where you get a team Well, like Houston, who's now in the Big 12, but they were my perfect thought process about a team that could sneak in there, and you're like, wait a minute, what are they even doing in the playoff? Because they looked at the body of work, they saw the upsets, they saw what they were able to do, and they're like, okay, yeah, put them in. But a lot of this is going to be based on television revenue, Andy, because we've already preferenced this. But I think for sure they're going to the 4 + 4 + 4. Your thoughts about the 4 + 4 + 4?
No, I can definitely see it because we've seen now that like this year, the Florida State stuff kept coming up. And the reality is that the playoff committee wants to have the power to create the best possible matchups. And was Florida State without Jordan Travis one of the 4 best teams at the end of the year? No, absolutely not. But by the rules that the committee had set up previously, it didn't matter what they were on that last day of the season. You should have looked at the body of work, like you're saying, in totality. And I think that this is where, with a 12-team playoff, you get that level of cover where you can say, all right, Florida State, you're missing Jordan Travis. I guess it's a bad example because they did win the ACC, but you don't win your conference. You're missing a key player, so you lose that conference championship game. You're not ranked in the top 10. You're not ranked in the top 6, 7, 8, or whatever it takes to get one of those top 8 seeds. But we want to put you in the playoff because your team has deserved it based off of the season that you're having. Yes. Same thing with Notre Dame, who, plays an mostly independent schedule, has usually a pretty strong strength of schedule. They lose 3 games. Okay, we want to put Notre Dame in here over, insert 2-loss or 1-loss Syracuse that played a soft schedule or something. Like, I think that this is, again, everything is going to be geared towards these bigger schools that have to play tougher schedules, that are on TV the most, that generate the most revenue. And at the same time, the committee understands they do need to have the Cinderella elements, and they do need to make sure that the best stories of a college football season are put into the playoff every year in order to make the most compelling game watching product. Because what they don't want to do is have the first round of the 12-team playoff be much like what the first round of the 4-team playoff was for a lot of years, where we were just watching a number 1 seed destroy a 4 seed Notre Dame or Clemson or one of these weaker undefeated teams that made their way into the playoff. Like, they need, if the game's going to be a blowout, it needs to be compelling. And so you get that compelling stuff from having the playoff committee have the ability to say, let's pick the best story. Let's pick a team that had a weird situation that's now different than where they were at the beginning of the season, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And I think that because the issue is, the bottom line is, bro, they got to sell tickets. And if they can't sell tickets, it don't matter. Yeah. So that's why I said that. And this is why I said they're going to flex that muscle on that middle 4. Because remember, the format is the top 4 get the buys. The middle 4 host the playoff games. They're going to make sure that those games go to the best team, the places that have the biggest revenue. So they're looking at like the Penn States, the LSUs, the, Ole Misses, the Wisconsins, maybe even like an Oregon or Ohio State. They're going to make sure that those teams get and host that playoff game. That's why I said they're going to flex in the 4 in the middle. Got it? All right, so last subject, bro. Now, and this is a sort of weird topic, right? We got the Olympics, the underwear Olympics jumping off, right? Now, we get on with college football over here on this channel, right? But at the same time, we got people that follow us on both sides of the ball. They follow us on the professional side. They follow us on the college side. Me and you have in-depth insight to like guys that we know that's going to jump off the page at the combine and all whatever else. So as these guys exit out of college football and enter professional football, we just want to give our listeners and our viewers and everybody that rock with us a little insight about a few guys that just left a couple college programs that we know about that they need to take a really hard look at moving forward for that 2024 NFL draft. So, Andy, who you got? Who's your top guys? 3, 4, 5, whoever you want to list off that you think that people really need to pay attention to in this upcoming NFL Combine, which is less than like a week away.
Yeah, and like for me, I always love the NFL Combine because it gives guys that were either at smaller schools or in weird situations, like at a Syracuse, where obviously it is a smaller school, but they're not always good. But there's NFL talent on a lot of these rosters.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned Syracuse because I look at a lot of these guys in the last couple of years who have become just really solid NFL players, but they
Mm-hmm.
rose at the combine. The combine is your opportunity to get on the radar of scouts and really know it. So the
Mm-hmm.
Athletic kind of scooped me on this today. There's a great article on it. I'm really excited to look at Karan Amegaji. Kieran Amegaji. He is an
Mm-hmm.
offensive line. He's an offensive line prospect out of Yale, and so that's why
Yes.
you've never heard of him. Is that
Mm-hmm.
he's Yale kid, and that just generally means that you're not really going to hear of them. However, first team All Ivy League, that means something. 6'5", 326,
Yes.
NFL sized player at Yale. And
Long
so what
arms
this
too. Long arms. Long arms.
and so this is the thing that I think we're going to see at the combine is that when you see a big kid on an Ivy League roster, your normal thought is like, all right, they're just not athletic and they're winning because of their size. I'm really hoping that he shows up here and has a nice little raise. Because I think right now he's sitting on the last day, maybe undrafted free agent preference. So that way he can sign with whatever team he wants to. I honestly think that this kid has the ability to be drafted somewhere on day 2. He's got fantastic footwork, which comes from growing up playing soccer and not playing American football. So he's got those quick feet that you need to have at the NFL level for an offensive lineman. And like you said, he's got long arms. I think he's got the body for it. He needs to show off his athleticism at this combine in order to really, take that next step and show out that you want to do. And I think that for me, like this is always the most exciting. This is always the most exciting part. The other one that I'm going to say that I just saw this kid absolutely trash Syracuse. I know it's not like my small school side,
Yeah.
but Devontae Walker from North Carolina didn't play.
He's a dog. He's a
Did
dog.
not. A lot of people missed out on him because he missed the first part of the season, and then UNC started struggling because of some eligibility issues that we're still not 100% sure what happened there. But he got cleared by the NCAA, came in. He's 6'1". He's a shifty slot guy, but he's got sprinter speed and can get down the field in a hurry. He seems like that perfect kind of wide receiver that Kansas City would really like to add to their roster. So when you're thinking about like teams that I would like to see him go to, probably not a day 1 guy, probably not even a day 2 guy, just with how loaded this wide receiver class is. But he's somebody that if your team snags him later on in the draft, that's going to be a win. And so for him, he's trying to get up into that guaranteed day 2 slots in the combine. I think he can do that with his 40 time. He needs to show off his strength because I think that the knack on him right now is that everybody's looking at him and they're going, he's small and he's fast, so he's probably not that strong. I saw him take on a 6'1" corner that Syracuse has, whose entire premise is that he can lock you down man-to-man coverage. He's got, great footwork, great technique. Des Walker just absolutely out-muscled him, out-strengthed him at every rep. And I think that to me, like if you're Walker, this is your chance to show that to the NFL scouts.
Total facts, bro. Now, Andy, some of those folks that watch me or listen to me on these other podcast formats, they know Big G's got his black book, bro. Like other folks got their black book. I keeps my black book, bro, about guys that I need people to pay attention to and watch upcoming, not just for the Steelers, right? Not just for Pittsburgh, because everybody knows I'm a Steelers fan, but guys that I know at the next level could really be that guy, right? So in Steeler country, they're whining and crying, and we need offensive linemen, we need a center, we need this and that. Let me tell you about this kid named Graham Barton, offensive lineman, University of Duke. When I'm telling you that Graham is the guy, I went back and watched tape on him, man. When I'm telling you, I dug deep with tape, and I watched, and I watched, and I watched, and I watched. He's a mauler, right? You could put him at center, you could put him at guard, and realistically, you could put him at tackle. He could play all 3 spots. But when I'm telling you, for all you Steeler fans that's listening to me, This kid's got a little Dave DeCastro in him. He's got some Dave DeCastro in him, bro. He's nasty. He's nasty.
I miss that man.
Oh man, Dave DeCastro, he's not. This kid is nasty. He pancake blocks guys. He goes well past the whistle, and he's always aggressive. You never see a play where he gets knocked backwards. Everything for him is always going forward. And he's nasty. Double team blocks. He don't care. He'll pull, he'll trap. It don't matter. So I've been like, man, these Steeler fans is talking about, we need to get this guy and this guy. You bet. Listen, evaluators out in Pittsburgh, you better take a good, hard look at Graham Barton, offensive lineman, University of Duke. My second guy, who is not necessarily a Steeler, but if you need a tight end, H-back guy, you need to take a look at him. His name is Dallin Holker, tight end, Colorado State University. Listen, I saw him destroy Colorado. I went back and watched almost that whole game on all 22. And when I'm telling you this kid can run every route in the route tree, he can do it. He can run every single route that's in the route tree at a wide receiver slot or put his hand in the ground and actually block like a tight end. His stats even show even more because, I'm a numbers guy. Andy, you're a bigger number guy than me. But, I'm like film don't lie, bro. So if you need a cross hybrid Sam Laporta tight end to come for your team, you need to check this kid out, man, because he can block. So I was like, man, because I know we got folks that watch us and their teams need a tight end. This guy's he's not going to be a day one, but he definitely should go on day two. If he gets past the third round, it's an injustice. It's a total injustice of what's going on with him as a player for a guy who's going to be evaluated for the draft. I got one more kid, man, and I need to pull up his stuff because I was watching him, and like I said, I got my black book, but I wanted to make sure I got his name because I always mess his first name up. His name is Peyton Wilson, inside linebacker from your ACC country, North Carolina State University. Pittsburgh Steelers, we've identified our guy. If we have a second and or third round draft pick in this year's upcoming draft at the inside linebacker, because I know the big pick's going to be Jeremiah Trotter Jr., because people are going to freak out about his combine numbers. I know a lot of folks are going to be talking about the inside linebacker from North Carolina University, but the kid from NC State, Peyton Wilson, let me tell y'all, last year I was upset. And I was on the draft special shows, I was like 5 out of 5 for guys that I wanted to identify as Steelers. I got JPJ, I got Keanu Benton, I got Mount Washington. I got all the guys I wanted. I got the tackle Jones from Georgia. I'm going to be hot and upset if the Steelers don't get Peyton Wilson. Because there was a guy that I wanted for Pittsburgh that we didn't draft last year, which I think we should have got him, and his name was Jack Campbell, the starting middle linebacker for the Detroit Lions this year, right? Day one starter as a rookie. Peyton Wilson is built just like Jack Campbell. He's 6'4", 240 pounds. He's going to run like a 4.5, maybe a low 4.48, 4.49, but no higher than a 4.53, 4.54. He can run like a deer. And when I'm telling you he's coming downhill and going to cause some pain and some action, he's coming downhill to cause some pain and some action. He was second at ACC in all tackles. Listen, and I mean, that's not saying like SEC, but listen, if you're second in your conference with total tackles, that's letting you know he's causing problems. He's going to smash everywhere he gets. And we say pause on the other line, but I ain't saying there's no pause on level up. He's going to smash the guy that he runs into moving forward. So Steeler Nation, you're going to hear me talking a lot about on the other channels. Peyton Wilson, linebacker, North Carolina State University. Andy, we're to the close of the show. We got about a minute or two left, man. Any final thoughts before we get off the Level Up podcast on Fans First Sports Network?
just to put a quick bow on that prospect talk, one name watch out for: Quantez Stiggers.
Yeah.
First ever prospect to not go to college invited to the combine. He was playing he was playing D2 to get eligible, and then his father died, led to a rough situation for the family. So he went to the CFL, and in the CFL only won the Rookie of the Year award. He's a defensive back. He's going to be at the combine. We saw it with college basketball, man. Once the first person does it, can really change up some things. And if Stiggers is able to show that this is a viable path for prospects, it's going to open up a whole new world of recruiting for NCAA stuff. So
total facts.
For me, that is like, this is why there's no off season. Everything can change. Everything can matter in college football.
Yeah, facts. All right, so Andy, you're closing. That's your final thoughts or anything else?
That's my final thought.
Where can the people find you at, Andy?
You can find me on Fans First Sports Network podcast. I do this one. I do the Syracuse show, Disloyal Idiots. We got a new basketball show spun up on that on Disloyal Idiots as well. So make sure you go and check out the more basketball inclined folks over there if you're a Syracuse fan. And as always, I'm going to be here with Big G on the Level Up show every Monday-ish.
Facts. Hey, man, I forgot to tell you, too, congratulations on Syracuse popping the University of North Carolina in that basketball game. They still on the floor and everything. I saw it. I was like, wow. I forgot to tell you, congratulations out for the Cuse, man.
We're getting back there. It's been some dark years. We're rebuilding. Everything in Cuse is about rebuilding right now.
Yeah, Red Autry is in the right way. You know, I like him as a coach. He was a good player for the Cuse.
Exactly.
All right, man, my final thoughts is, man, listen, like we've been saying all along, there is no offseason in college football. There's none. You gotta pay attention to everything that's going on. And so when you get to the season, you won't be so far behind in listening. So that's why we're building the podcast format and why me and Andy have agreed, even throughout the offseason, we're going to make sure you bring you content every week on Fans First Sports Network, Level Up College Football Podcast. Because trust me and believe, stuff's going to go down just like how we told you today every week, all the way until we get to the season. And then by then, it's going to be too late. You know, like if you're a fan and you're a real fan and you're trying to catch up, it's going to be too late. So, but you can always go back and listen to me and Andy P on any of the Fans First Sports Network podcasts. We got the Level Up podcast. We got Steel Curtain Nation, Steel Curtain Network, stuff all across the board. All Andy does over there on the Syracuse Network. Listen to us, like, subscribe, and share with everybody out there in podcast land. Because like I said, college football never sleeps. As for me and Andy P on Fans First Sports Network, Level Up Podcast, we'll holler at you next week. Peace.